So recently, I've been doing my best to keep up with all the new TV shows and movies that have been coming out. And have you guys noticed that there's a lot more movies and TV shows that are interacting with and incorporating the concept of alternate universes and parallel dimensions into their plots and storylines? I know that I have. So I think that's what I really want to talk about today, and why we're seeing this multiverse concept in media more often. And just to let you guys know, I won't be doing that thing that some YouTubers do, where when talking about alternate timelines, they interact with their parallel selves, because do you guys really find that entertaining as a viewer? I know that I usually don't. I don't know. I think that these overly long dialogues that they have really only serve as an ego-stricken, self-referential charade that really says more about the YouTuber in question who's doing it than, oh my god, it's really you. Listen, I am so sorry to barge in, but there is this major interdimensional war going on that threatens to tear apart the very fabric of space-time, and I really need your help to— Who the hell are you? I'm you, from an alternate universe. Wait, actually, can we just not do this? I've been putting off making this video for so long, and I just talked about how I didn't want to bog it down with timeline weirdness, so could we maybe do this later? You know what? I'll actually put a pin in it, and we can come back to it at another time, right? But you know what? Never mind. You clearly have very important things to do that don't involve saving the entire multiverse. So I'll just leave you to do this. Have fun making this video thing or whatever. I will, thanks. Okay, bye. Nope, I don't want to hear it from you either. Anyway, in choosing this topic for this video, I wanted to discuss media about the multiverse that immediately came to mind when thinking about covering this, or that I thought had something interesting or unique to say through the use of the multiverse. But before getting into all of that, my name is Cher, and this is my art and media criticism space. If you're new here, hey, feel free to check out my other videos after watching this one and see if my content vibes at all with you. And if you're returning, hello, welcome. Always a pleasure to see you again. I hope you'll enjoy this little look into the media that has incorporated the concept of multiverses into their storylines. So, because I'll be using the word multiverse a lot during this video, and just to be on the same page, it's time for the obligatory standard definition of what the word multiverse actually means. The term multiverse was first coined by the philosopher William James, though rather than our current concept of the multiverse referring to parallel worlds, he used that word in reference to multiple possibilities that were available in a person's life. But the current idea of the multiverse is defined as a hypothetical group of multiple universes existing concurrently to our own reality, and other well-known terms for this concept are known as parallel universes, alternate universes, / dimensions, so I'll be using all of those terms interchangeably as well throughout this video. While the idea of multiple universes may seem like a fairly modern concept, initial ideas of the multiverse can actually be found back thousands of years ago. The earliest ideas of multiple universes can actually be found in two ancient schools of Greek thought: the atomists and the Stoics. The atomists theorized the universe was composed of these very small building blocks known as atoms. Traditional atomists proposed that all physical objects in our world consisted of the different arrangements of such atoms, as they all collided and formed in various and infinite combinations and shapes. And as a continuation of this thought, it could stand to reason that an infinite number of atomic collisions could give rise to other parallel universes that could be created through these collisions. While the atomist school of thought leaves no room for a creator god, so to say, the Greek Stoics believed that the cosmos was a pantheistic god who presided over the world's unceasingly changing nature involving a cycle of births, deaths, and rebirths. Ideas about the multiverse continue to evolve into other schools of thought like Buddhist philosophy, and even well into the medieval ages and throughout history. For more in-depth examples, I really recommend checking out this article, The Multiverse as an Ancient Idea, where it shines a light on Buddhist ideas of parallel universes as well as interesting rebuttals from people throughout time. But I hope the few examples that I pulled really illustrate the point of multiverse theories being as old as human understandings of the world. So after getting into that brief bit of history, we can get into the more contemporary introduction to the multiverse of multiverse storylines in mainstream media. An early example of multiverse storylines that are relevant to the media that I'll talk about today actually date back to comics, with the first introduction of multiple worlds being attributed to an early DC comic. While most people would attribute that to a Flash comic, it was actually first mentioned in the 1953 Volume 1 Wonder Woman comic, where Princess Diana meets her identical alternate reality double, Terra Taruna. The Flash comic wouldn't come until almost a decade later in 1963, when our speedy hero meets his own parallel twin. And both heroes are actually pretty chill and cool about the whole discovering an alternate universe that they also also exist in Thing. We would later see Marvel Comics introduce the idea of AU heroes with their Volume 1, 1977 comic series What If, where we see alternative takes on well-established Marvel heroes. Over the years, comic-inspired fans went on to create properties that explored these concepts in cinema, and we would eventually end up with the big juggernaut that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe today, which itself is recently diving headfirst into multiverse territory. And it's from here that I want to transition into talking about the multiverse media that I wanted to cover today. Though even though I just mentioned the MCU, I won't talk about Loki or No Way Home or Multiverse of Madness, especially the latter of the three, because the lack of multiverse filled me with madness. Also, MCU films these days have way too much character baggage to even properly explain to someone who's not really caught up or who hasn't even started, but I hope you still find the media that I picked to discuss today interesting anyway. I'll also try to avoid major spoilers in the media that I'll bring up, but because we're talking about themes and things, there will be some story aspects that I'll have to get into. So let's just get into them. Now, I can't make a video about the multiverse without talking about Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty is an adult animated series that follows an aging scientist Rick and his many adventures with his grandchildren Summer and Morty, along with an assortment of other characters as they interact with many worlds and universes, as well as interacting with sci-fi concepts, gadgets, and gizmos, and tropes we've all come to expect from the sci-fi genre. In Season 1, Episode 6, titled Rick Potion Number 9, we're actually introduced to the concept of parallel universes and worlds pretty early on, after Morty's experience with using a love potion to get his crush to reciprocate his feelings goes apocalyptically wrong. We see Rick and Morty flee into a parallel universe where the two take over the lives of their now dead alternate selves. The concept of coexisting and dealing with your alternate selves is something that is visited in several episodes and actually becomes a major story arc in the show with a multi-season villain who has a vendetta against the seemingly hierarchical order of the current multiverse that they live in. I would say that overall, the use of the multiverse in the show has a nihilistic, existentialist bend to it, as the reality of having multiple copies of yourself running around doing infinitely better or worse than you means that your particular existence has no inherent value or even meaning, really. Though in the multiverse of the show, certain roles do still need to be filled, depending on if you're a Rick variant or a Morty variant, but that's kind of beside the point and is explored more in Season 5. And while we're on this thread of coexisting with alternate versions of yourself, let's transition to the next bit of media that I wanted to talk about. Oscar Award-nominating animated film Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is a movie that was released in late 2018 that explored the long-running Spider-Verse concept from the comics and put it into an animated movie. And if you don't know the plot of this movie, well, let's start at the beginning. One last time. The movie follows Miles Morales, an ordinary teen who is thrust into extraordinary circumstances when, on one fateful day, he is bitten by a radioactive spider that gives him the powers that we attribute to the one and only Spider-Man. The only problem is that his world already has a Spider-Man, but if you think it's strange enough for two Spider-Men to exist at the same universe, then how about 7? All of them brought together by the villain's use of universe portals that they all have to learn to work together to put a stop to. I think Spider-Verse has a lot of important themes related to the multiverse, like identity, responsibility, grief, and loss that I'd love to have time to dig into, maybe in a future video, but I'll just talk about the way it touches on identity and loneliness for now. The movie shows how Miles is crafting an identity, like any other teen, that only becomes more complicated when he becomes Spider-Man. He spends a lot of this film emulating the more established Spidey heroes, his quirks and his specialties, but ends up feeling even more different and alone when amongst the only people who should be able to understand him. It's only when he decides to become his own version of this universe's Spider-Man that he ends up really growing into the role by growing into himself. It's once he grows that he realizes that though he may not have been ready at first to be a hero, it doesn't mean that he'll never be. And once he gets past that, he begins to realize that he isn't alone and that these other Spider-Men have gone through what he has to some extent, and they're able to connect over that. And he further realizes that there are other people fighting the good fight, always getting back up when they go down and coming out on top. So the significance of the multiverse in this film is used to communicate the need for community and support when finding resilience in adversity and discovering who you are. And this isn't something that Miles alone learns, as even the more experienced Spideys still have to learn to work together as a team and connect over their shared grief and loss as they find a way to work together as a team rather than facing the threat solo as they've always done. Again, there's more that can be said about the themes in this film, but for brevity's sake, I'll just leave the analysis here and we can move on to the next and final bit of media about the multiverse that I'm really excited to talk about. So the plot of this next movie is kind of absurd and also a little complicated, but I'll try to condense it. Everything Everywhere All at Once tells the story of a working-class Chinese-American laundromat owner, Evelyn Kwan, who is taken from the average and mundane world of filing taxes for a failing business to facing an interdimensional rupture that she must now use her newfound powers, which are unlocked through channeling alternate variants of herself to defeat the dangers to her reality and ultimately restore balance in the multiverse. Throughout this film, there feels like there's this back and forth conversation about the alluring pull of nihilism and an existence without inherent meaning versus with the ideas of having an unceasing love for the beauty and kindness that lives in the present and the way that different generations have latched to one or the other as a means of survival. And these perspectives are portrayed through the more youthful and apathetic antagonist, Joby Tubaki, through Wayman, Evelyn's husband, who more exudes the latter ideology of positivity with his approach of remaining kind when faced with adversity, and even through Evelyn, who is a middle ground in all of this as she learns to balance the apathetic nihilism with the radical kindness that she learns from her husband. We come to learn in this film that Joby Tubaki's nihilistic outlook is shaped with the infinite time she spent living through multiple and vastly different worlds, only to come to the conclusion that there is no greater meaning to any of them, and she questions the point of allowing any universe to continue. And after going through all of that, she has the essence of everything distilled into a bagel. Yes, an everything bagel. And said bagel, if used as intended, has the ability to destroy all realities. I won't say how this movie ends for those who still haven't seen it, but the balance of nihilism and radical kindness, of seeking understanding in a confusing existence, and resolving rifts between generations are all major factors in how this conflict gets resolved. So the idea of the multiverse in this film is used to celebrate both the chaotic and mundane aspects of life, of accepting your choices and putting more meaning into the deep connections that we make with others, rather than the ideas of what our lives should be or the potentials that we're not living up to. Because even in alternate realities where we assume things worked out the best for us financially or materially, the relationships that we build and the moments that we get to experience with each other in the here and now are what really drives us as people. A line from the movie that I really love and that also really highlights this point is one between a version of Evelyn and Wayman, who've become successful in their separate ventures through Evelyn's decision in this timeline to decide not to emigrate to America with Wayman. In this scene, the successful businessman Wayman variant has just turned down movie star Evelyn, and he leaves her by saying this: "So, even though you have broken my heart yet again, I wanted to say, in another life, I would have really liked just doing laundry and taxes with you." I think this line further illustrates the former point about the importance of human connection and shared experiences, even in the mundane things like folding laundry. It matters so much more than material accrual or the financial excesses, though money is a big point of contention in this movie. Everything Everywhere All at Once has come to be one of my favorite films, not just about the universe, but in general, because of the way it balances the silliness with the sentimental moments and how it leaves me with a lot to think about in the way that I view my own life. I also think it's very representative of how my brain works too, usually so overstimulated and confusing, but capable of having deeper thoughts and meaning somewhere in that chaos. Also, as a final tidbit for this section, I didn't really know where else to include it, so I'll just include it at the end. I just wanted to note that the directors for Everywhere Everything, Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, also known collectively as the Daniels, also worked on SpiderVerse while they were finalizing the script for this movie, which isn't to say that the previous film majorly inspired this one. They were actually working on the ideas for Everything Everywhere for a while before they joined SpiderVerse. I just thought it was cool to mention that there's this lovely little link between two movies that I completely love, and I like how they were able to more finalize this chaotic idea of the multiverse into this one movie. So, in discussing some media with multiverse themes, I wanted to end this discussion with why we're seeing it a lot more in media now and what that's going to look like in the short-term future. I think that from a storytelling perspective, viewing the same characters or situation through an infinite number of perspectives when introducing parallel universes opens up a possibility of a wider variety of complex thinking and stories when done right. I think this was mentioned by the Daniels in one interview when faced with the possibility of using the multiverse to combine all of their different thinking and media that influenced them. They were excited by this and said, we're like, great, we can do our existential film that we've been wanting to make. It can be a playful sci-fi, it can be an Asian American story, we can do kung fu fight scenes like we've always wanted to try. I think that what makes these stories more viable to the general public is that with cinema being over a century old at this point, most of us are used to the basic 3-act structure of storytelling and have even become accustomed to films that like to bend the rules a bit. So I think there is more trust in the audience to be able to work through these high concept stories to get to the root of what a film is trying to communicate. Another interesting angle I think about is considering the pandemic, how a lot of us grieved over plans, both big and inconsequential, that weren't able to happen. Many of us turned to sort of imagining realities where either never existed in our lifetime or happened earlier or later. And I feel like there is some angle of escapism, especially during the quarantine period, where a lot of people felt that they weren't able to live up to the potential that 2020 had in store for them. I feel that a lot of multiverse media coming out at this time really answers to that angst or the loss of something that didn't happen. As for my opinions on media that utilize the multiverse concept, well, I hope that it's been pretty clear that I'm pretty positive and open to more stories like that. I think that as a person who often contemplates the possibility of the multiverse and wonders about the kind of antics that variants of myself are getting up to, I'm really glad to see this concept played with more, and I'm excited to see what future stories can be told and universal themes and tropes pulled from this kind of high concept thing. We also don't see signs of multiverse media slowing down. SpiderVerse currently has 2 sequel films in development at the time of this video's release, and I am patiently, yet not so patiently, waiting for SpiderVerse 2 and the subsequent films and spin-offs. I'm also curious what new films the multiverse will come to represent in those sequels. And in ending this video, I'm sort of thinking about earlier events. You know, maybe I will check in on how that multi-dimensional war thing is going for Variant Me. After all, it's not every day that you get to meet your alternate self. So I think that about covers my thoughts on this video about the multiverse in media. But now I want to know what you guys think about the movies and TV shows that I covered, and what are your favorite takes on the multiverse in media? Let me know all of your thoughts down in the comments below. I also do want to mention that though the current state of our world in certain countries feels like it's worth dismissing or escaping from, the reality is that it's the only one that we've got, or at least know about. And while certain policies and lawmakers in certain countries are doing things that seem right out of fictional dystopias, we have to face that this is our reality, but it's a good thing that our realities are shaped by us and not just the other way around, and that they are capable of change. So that's why I wanted to talk about the National Network of Abortion Funds, where if you decide to donate, your donation is split evenly between different abortion funds to give people who are capable of childbearing a chance to decide what their realities are going to look like. I hope that if you guys are financially able to, check out what I just talked about, as there's a link down in the description for that if you feel so compelled. Transitioning from that a little bit, I just wanted to acknowledge that this channel just hit 500 subscribers a few days ago, and I'm so grateful that there are people outside of my family and friends who like to watch these videos. I think that even though I mostly make these to entertain myself, it's really cool that other people like some of them too. But it's also kind of nerve-wracking because that's like 1,000 eyeballs staring straight at me, but also pretty cool in a weird way. But anyway, thank you guys so much for sticking around. I hope to have the next video out sooner than it took me to get this one out. I don't even know what happened. Yeah, I think that's all I need to say. Feel free to follow me on my Instagram or my Twitter. I have a Ko-fi link if you'd like to give a little tip for this video, and an INPRNT link down below if you'd like to buy some prints from me. Yeah, I think that covers everything. Actually, no, it doesn't, because I wanted to introduce someone really special in my life and who's brought me a lot of joy in the past 2 years, and it is this little rock guy, MUA sort of thing. So he looks so good. I found him like 2 years ago, and I didn't know where else to put him in this video, but because I talked about everything everywhere, I'm just like, this feels so apt. So meet this little guy. He doesn't have a name. Maybe I'll call him like Rocky. Remember to stay kind, to stay safe, stay kind, and I hope to see you all again in the next video. Bye.